last year, I saw so many Black women try to solve a problem in dating by starting to host events in person, trying to create third spaces to facilitate dating like offline. And you know what would happen every single time? The men were not signing up.
I say all of this with the utmost kindness and respect. I applaud efforts to heal the divides, bring together community, and promote love. However, before y'all make these events, do you ask men how they feel about them or how they want them to be set up? I'm not saying these events should cater to men exclusively, of course not. But don't say us women, regardless of race, are working on a solution about dating. Not involve men in how you make that solution and then get frustrated when they don't show up.
The jury is no longer out. I need to stop doing things for the plot. I am like the prime example of curiosity killed the cat, because the way I just always have to investigate things and see things for myself, it is slowly killing me. I walked into that event last night and I wanted to die. It was so bad that I almost couldn't wait until today to update you guys. I was gonna do a video last night as soon as I got home, but then I ended up passing out. And of course, a lot of things are all about the perspective, but I'm gonna tell you why for me, it was a big no. So for starters, when you walk in, you have to get a name tag. And that's fine. I guess that's a good thing. But also I was like, what if I don't want someone to know my name? I don't know. And then when I did walk in, I was like, okay, I was wrong. It's not just women here. But the men that were there they were something. I could have turned and walked right back out immediately. And I should have. I was still waiting on the two girls I was supposed to be meeting there to come. So I was trying not to bail before they got there. So I tried to walk around by myself for a minute. Thankfully, a lot of people there were there alone. It was everyone's first time doing it. So I found some cool girls who invited me over to their table and I got to talk to them for a little bit. But even if you were sitting with girls, guys would always come over and talk. That's the whole point. I get it. But I was just I'm kind of just here for the girlies, I think. And so whenever a guy would come, I'm like, this is ruining the vibes. Quite literally, the whole point in being there was to find potential people to date. And to me, men being there, I was like, this is going to ruin the tour. Also, everyone was so short. Every single man there was less than 5'10", or 5'10" or less, I mean. I was taller than all of them. Except one. There was one really, really tall man. None of them are attractive. No one, not one was attractive. Not even he could, no, not close. And this is probably one of the meanest things that you would ever hear me say, but there was a man there that looked like the kind of guy you should be afraid of if he was walking towards a school.
Welcome back to the channel. You see the information on the screen, so you know I'm all about marriage, and I have been out here pushing the marriage narrative for about 5 years, and I've worked with a lot of singles over at Christian Singles Connect. You'll probably see the information on the screen. Now, let's get into this. Y'all know, because I do work with singles and I do have Christian Singles Connect, that singles mixers and really anything dealing with singles is near and dear to my heart. And there is this move, definitely throughout social media, where people are really trying to find out, honestly, where to meet people. I mean, that is really becoming the issue, because most people have recognized that dating apps don't work. And my belief, honestly, of the main reason why dating apps don't work is because it's overkill. It simply is overkill. So what happens is almost every woman I've talked to has, because, decently attractive women will have 50, honestly, even up to 100 men, in their feed, as far as they're literally connections. They've already matched with this guy. And they'll literally have that going on at almost any given moment. And I rarely run into women who pause their account, because you can actually do that. And I've always even said back in the day when I was actually encouraging people to be on dating apps, that's kind of how I would encourage women especially to do it. I would say, okay, you get 2 or 3 men that are interested in you. You like them. Okay, so you've connected with them. Now pause your account. Basically say, I'm not willing to talk to anybody else until I've talked to these 3 people and I've vetted them enough, okay, to go to the next person. But a lot of women don't do that. They just let that, men just constantly get into their DMs, into their matches, whatever you want to call it. And so what ends up happening is the men become frustrated because now they're waiting forever, to talk to the woman that they want to. Meanwhile, sometimes some apps will even expire. They'll actually have that, that match to expire. Because really what they're trying to do is to encourage the women to interact. And the number one way for women to actually get to know men is to interact with them. It's not just about what you see. All right? And I've even talked about that. When women lean too much into what they see, that's actually very masculine in that energy, to lean so much into what you see. Now, that being said, I always want women to be attracted to the person that they are talking to. In fact, recently on Thursday Talks, that actually came up and we talked about it. So I wanted to start there because there's this struggle where everybody's trying to find people. Now, let's go into the singles events because, I'm here in Atlanta. So for those that are here in Atlanta or even have thought about coming to Atlanta, I am going to talk about what I have seen. All right, so Christian Singles Connect, like I say, has been around. We have done our own events. And when we were doing events, our main goal and what we would tell people is look at the group as a family, okay? Don't come in with the mindset of, I'm going to find my person at this event and then go away. Instead, see us as a group of people that you can hang out with, that you can exchange numbers with, even sometimes woman to woman or man to man, so that you can find, your wing person so that you can even go out more. And the people that have been successful, that have hung out in Christian Singles Connect, they took that mindset. They would come to event after event after event. They would hang out with us as a group. And then many times, a lot of the women, like I said, might actually, get other women's phone numbers. They might actually go say, hey, what you doing Friday night? Let's go out, to this place. I've heard that there's men or this, that, and the third. So it was kind of like a community. And a lot of the men did the same thing. I actually had about 2 or 3 guys that I would call and be like, yo, what are you doing on Saturday? What are you doing on Friday, Thursday, whatever? Let's go out. Let's do something. Let's get in front of some women. Because a lot of people just don't like going out by themselves. All right. Especially to new environments. And so I wanted to talk about that because in our environment, in the Christian Singles Connect environment, the average event was about 40% men and 60% women. Even out here on this channel, if you've actually watched any of the Thursday Talks, most of the time, the Thursday Talks that have been out here on J2 Connect have been about 40% men, 40 to 50% men, and like I said, 50 to 60% women. And there is something that needs to be noted, and that is you have to care about the men. You cannot just create an event. Like one lady said, okay, that women are out here creating these events because they believe that they're needed. And I believe that they're needed. I've even encouraged women to do it, but I had a formula on how I encourage women to do it. And I'll go over that formula later in this video. But I've always encouraged women to do it, but I'm always like, you have to consider the men. You can't do it just thinking how it was 30 years ago. Because 30 years ago, it was always catered, everything was catered to the woman. And what we're dealing with now is we're dealing with a new, just honestly, the new world that we're living in. It is not so much that the world is different. It's just the world, believe it or not, the more connected we become, the more separated we become. And a lot of people have talked about this over and over again because we believe that we're connected to people. But what's really happening in essence is that we use all these connections. And just like with the dating app, we use that to become pickier about our connections. Let's talk about a serious example right here. Think about back when you were in elementary school. In elementary school, you probably had one, if not two friends that you didn't really even like. Let's be real. You didn't like this person, but you hung out with them anyway. Why did you hang out with them? Because you didn't have another choice. You had no choices, so you hung out with them. I remember literally hanging out with guys that bullied me. I hung out with guys that I actually hung out with one guy that stole from me. I can think about all these things and I'm like, dang, why did I do that? But in that environment, there was a limited amount of people. I probably had 25 to 30 people in my class as far as school was concerned, which means it probably was about 12 to 15 boys. Okay, when I went home to my neighborhood, there was probably 10 young boys that I could hang out with. That was it. So I had definitely people who I enjoyed hanging out with more, but if they were busy, then I had to hang out with the knucklehead that I didn't want to hang out with. Okay, and that's how it was. But see, now we have all these connections, and so now we don't really spend time with people that are just average or just are okay. And because I'm not saying you got to hang out with bad people, okay? I don't want y'all to get messed up with my example here. But what I'm saying is we now have become so picky because we believe that we have access to all of this. And see, that's an illusion. It's an illusion given to us by society, or for the Christians, by the devil, because he understands how humans work. Okay, he understands us better than we understand him. All right. And again, in the single spaces, a lot of people are not talking about this. So it's really important to understand that. But for the people, the women, if they're watching this particular video and then they want to really understand about singles events, you have to always think, what do the men want? What's going to bring the men out? And like I said, it's not that it has to be 100% about the men, but it can't be 10% about the men. It needs to be more like 30 to 40% about what's going to make the men come out. Now, let's get into the meat of it, because I don't want this video to be too long, and I know what you want to hear about the Atlanta meetups. So I have been to several. Like I said, I have talked about making a bigger one. We've talked about doing speed dating and a lot of things. And I do think that in June, that's kind of what I'm going to throw around right now. I do think I'm going to try to push for a singles mixer here in Atlanta. It'll be our first, because I've been going around now. I've been studying. And so I think I might be ready. Whether it works or doesn't, I'm probably just gonna let it be what it is, and then we're gonna try to see what we can do. That being said, I'm gonna get real with you, and the very first thing that I'm going to tell you is there's differences when it comes to race/culture. I'm just gonna be real, and also Christian events and church events. These are all different type of events, and they work totally differently. So when I've gone to a church event or even researched church events, okay, if you can find the church event, that's actually one of the biggest problems, because most churches do not do a good job of advertising. There was an event here actually in February at Change Church. I had no idea that was happening. And what was sad was I was going to Change Church every blue moon. In fact, it was funny because literally I was there in December. I went there like 2 or 3 times in December and in November, but I heard nothing about a singles event in February. And see, that's only 6 weeks out. They really should have been advertising that. Then online, there was really not a lot going on. So if you're not following Change Church on their, Instagram or whatever, there was no way for you to know. They did no advertisement. They did no advertisement where they would have had to pay Instagram or they would have had to pay TikTok. They just put it out on their social media. So if you went to the church, you knew about it. But if you didn't go to the church, you didn't. And see, big events like that need a lot of attention. They need people to know about them because people will even come from out of town to go to these events. Now, in that particular event, from what I've seen online, because I actually saw several videos talking about that, I just didn't put them up, with this particular video because I didn't really think it added anything. But in those particular videos, you can see literally hundreds of people. And while I can't say that there was a lot of men per se, like I said, if I find a video, I might throw it up because maybe I can find some context to that. But there were a lot of people. And when I, went to a Christian conference last year, a singles event last year, there was a lot of women, and there was only about 10% to 15% men. And all these conferences, they leaned towards Black people / African Americans / Africans / Caribbeans. All right. Now, a lot of women might be upset about that number, but I'm going to get more into that number in a minute. I just want to, like I said, give the overview right now. Okay. So the next type of event is basically a basic mixer. So I've been to a couple of those. And in the basic mixer, basic singles event, there on average that I run into, there's been about 65% of the people there are women and about, 35% are men. Recently, I did go to one that I actually thought was pretty good. I actually talked to the people that were over it. It was Intentions ATL. All right. And I even talked to the people that were over it. And there was about 30 women there, and there was about somewhere between 12 and 15 men. All right. And that was at that particular mixer. And again, I'm going to get more into the numbers a little bit later. But in this particular scenario, I will tell you this about the nature of the mixer. In that mixer, about half of the men did not engage with the women at all. One of the great things that I love about mixers is that I know I'm there to talk to women, and the women know I'm there to do that. And then the women want to talk to other men. So when you talk to a woman, you really never talk to her for more than 15 minutes. And she doesn't look at you funny when you literally go to the next table and talk to the next woman. So there is this understanding that everybody's there to talk to everybody else. And so nobody really wants to talk to you for more than 15 or 20 minutes, because if they're there for 2 or 3 hours, they know that they have a limited amount of time, to talk to all the people. And most people want to walk out of there with as many contacts as they possibly can. And so in this particular mixer that I went to, I actually walked out of there with 6 contacts. 6. Okay. Now, for the men watching this particular video, I can tell you of the 30 or so women that were there, it might have been 35 of the women that were there, in my opinion. All right. In my opinion, there was about 10 women that I would say, again, I know this might be harsh for some women, but I'm just trying to make sure I translate to the men. There was about 10 women that I would say were 6.5 and above. Okay. Most of the women there, were definitely 4s, 5s, and regular 6s. But that is normal. Remember, 5 is average. Okay. So when you're in these environments, 5 is average. You're not going to come into these environments and most of the women are super attractive. It's not going to happen. It's probably going to be about 25% of those women are going to be extremely attractive, because that is how averages work. Okay, we need to understand how these things work. All right. And generally speaking, the men is the same way. For the women watching this video, the men is the same way. You're going to have about 20 to 25% of the men that you might consider to be very attractive. And then you're going to have most of them are going to be average. And then there's going to be a few duds. All right. And see, that's why when the one woman was talking about the men at the event, she was actually being a little cruel, because she's not really thinking about, how these things work. And even the attractive men and attractive women, that come to these events, there's going to be a reason why they are at the event. Like for me, I work from home. I'm not around women all the time. So I do look for events and other things because I'm just literally not around them. I'm not the guy that can really see a lot of women at the grocery store or all these other places because a lot of times I'm just not there. My schedule just doesn't lean into that. And so a lot of the women were the exact same. There were a lot of women who work from home. There was a lot of women in, computers, IT, a lot of women that, just couldn't get out like that for whatever reason. All right. So I want to make sure I make that part clear. Now, there was another event. All right. And I actually thought about putting up the video for that, but I thought that the woman was a little cruel in how she talked about that particular one. So I didn't want to get too deep into it. But that was jigsaw dating. And when I went to that event, and it was actually a woman at Intentions ATL that told me about that event. So I at least wanted to go out and check it out. And the problem with Jigsaw is that Jigsaw is multicultural. Okay, they were multicultural. So there was a lot of people there from different races and different cultures. However, that event was very much like a lot of the other events that I've been to with multicultural environments. Generally speaking, when the environment is multicultural, there will be close to 50% of each. In most of the events that I've been to, it is really only in the Black events that there's this huge discrepancy between men and women, all right, as far as the numbers are concerned. However, at the Jigsaw event I went to, there was actually more men than there were women. Now, let's go into that, and then let's talk a little bit about the Jigsaw. And the reason why I'm bringing up Jigsaw is because the last lady that you all saw, I understand a little bit about what she was talking about. Again, remember, people that are decently attractive are going to be, the top 25% of our society, and they have the ability to get around. They're out and about doing things. They don't need these type of events. Okay? They just don't. And we have to be open and honest about that. Now, at the Jigsaw event, there was a few, in my opinion, there were a few attractive women there. Okay? But from a woman's perspective, I can't say if I thought the men were attractive. But what I can say is there were not a lot of men that were stylish. There were not a lot of men that were in shape. And I'm not saying that they were overweight, but you could just tell that they were not frequenting the gym. There were a lot of men that seemed, like I say, at that hyper nerd level. Like I've talked about it before, I'm an intellectual, which is just a nice way of saying nerd. Okay, but the difference between an intellectual and a nerd in reality is that the nerd doesn't know when to turn it off. Okay, there is still a place where you have to learn how to dress, where you have to learn how to comb your hair, where you have to learn how to do your beard, and you have to understand that these things are important. And a lot of the men there did not understand that they were important. I didn't really feel that a lot of guys that were at the Jigsaw event were actually stylish, that they really knew how to get around and do things. And honestly, I felt the same way with the women. The women did not come dressed to impress, as we talk about in the Black community. However, when I went to Intentions ATL, 90% of the people at that event were dressed to impress. Almost every single woman had on heels, a nice dress. They had their glam going. Most of the guys had some kind of aura about them, whether they had a nice shirt on, a chain, like I say, a blazer, jacket, a suit. They all came dressed to impress. And that was one of the huge differences between the two events. Okay. And I've noticed that even when I have gone to things that weren't mixers, but they were just more open forum, I have noticed that in the white community or in the more multicultural community, there's just a lot more of a laid backness to the people. They don't really dress up as much. But like I say, when you go to more Black events, I've even had brunches. We've even done brunches, here in Atlanta, where there will be women that will come out in heels, just to try to come to the brunch. and hang out with us. So I think there's more of a community there for women to dress, dress to impress, and even black people to dress to impress, where, like I say, a lot of the other events don't quite work that way. And I do think that that is a huge factor in the way that people are actually going to these events. Even with the Christian event, I found more women were coming dressed to impress. And a lot of the guys at least had a decent shirt on or something like that, because, again, they were very concerned about their appearance, because evidently in the black community, like I said, we really care about the outward appearance, which could honestly be, some of our problems in certain areas. But I've already talked about that. I'm not going to get into that in this particular video. Now, let's get into the numbers, okay? Because I think that a lot of women especially want to hear the numbers. The very first thing I would say, same thing I would tell you, like I say, from Christian Singles Connect perspective, and remember, we have events all the time here in Atlanta with Christian Singles Connect. You can't worry about the numbers. That's the first thing. I know a lot of women don't like that, but I'm going to be real with you. It is bigger than that, because a lot of times you just have to get out the house. Like at Christian Singles Connect, we've done a lot of events where we're just trying to get around people. Like right now, we have an event that we want to do in May. I don't know if this video is going to come out before or after that particular event, but we're about to do on May 3rd. We're going to do an event, and then we're going to follow that up with another event on May 17th. And at every event, we're always trying to put people, like I say, in that situation where they can be around other people outside of Christian Singles Connect. So what does this mean? So like, for instance, when we do the Beltline Scavenger Hunt, and that's going to come right in the middle of May. I think that's May 17th, because it's not going to be Mother's Day weekend. It's right after Mother's Day weekend. So if you want to come into, if you're close by, you want to drive in, or if you're in Atlanta, it's always fun to do the Beltline Scavenger Hunt. So for example, the Scavenger Hunt is built to help you talk to other people. That's literally what it's built to do. Okay, the whole purpose of that event is so that you can find other people. So how does this work? Well, one of the questions, okay, is going to be, because when we do the scavenger hunt, I kind of give you this, when we do the scavenger hunt, you're paired up with someone of your own gender, okay? And I had one guy, he fought me on it one year, and he just ran off with a girl that he liked from the group, and he couldn't finish the scavenger hunt. He had a really bad day. But again, I was telling him, listen to me, trust me, I have, your best interest at heart. So anyway, what ended up happening was, women are supposed to pair with women, men are supposed to pair with men. We wanted to be just two, but if, and every once in a while, we'll end up with a situation where we have three, because we just end up with an odd person. Now, what you're supposed to do, for instance, like two women might go down the belt line. And again, if you're not familiar with Atlanta, the belt line is a huge trail, which is downtown Atlanta. And a lot of people frequent the belt line. And there's a lot of restaurants and different things like that around the belt line. So a lot of people hang out on the belt line. So in this particular scenario, one of the things that they have to do is they have to find someone with an Atlanta sport team shirt on. All right? They have to, these two women, they have to find someone with an Atlanta sport team. So that could be the Falcons, that could be the Braves, okay, that could be Atlanta United. It really doesn't matter. And so what happens is when they're out there, that gives them the opening to talk to that person. Does this make sense? See, the whole point is for you to meet other people. And in this particular event, everything is built on you talking to men, for the women watching, to talk to men outside of Christian Singles Connect. And it's the same thing for the men that actually participate, to talk to women outside of Christian Singles Connect. Because when you got a list of things you have to do, okay, you really can't, act like, oh, well, you can, that gives you that opening. You see a woman, you're like, hey, would you help me out? I'm doing this scavenger hunt. They just say that, you have an Atlanta shirt on, so I just need to be able to take a picture with you. But you get that 5 minutes to talk to that person while you're taking the picture. Does this make sense? And that, again, is the essence of what we're trying to do. And every year is fun. Every year we have winners, and every year we have a lot of people to come out. But I think what people have to understand is that you have to do things to bring people together. All right. Now, let's get back to the numbers. Okay. Because I want to talk about that because, again, I'm basically trying to let you all know that it's not always about the numbers. And if you get so focused in on the numbers, you're going to miss your bigger blessing. Anyway, why aren't men coming out in droves? Well, again, it depends upon the situation. I've talked about it a lot where I say that a lot of women don't understand men. There's too much fantasy and not enough reality. Okay, the average man is not smooth. The average man doesn't know really how to talk to women. The average man is a little bit shyer than what women believe. Women have been forced to learn how to talk to men because men are constantly coming up to them, especially if they're decently attractive. So they've had to learn how to do it, even if they don't want to do it. It's just like I say, men can take themselves out of the dating game. Women cannot. Does this make sense? If a woman goes into the grocery store just to get her groceries, immediately, if men are attracted to her, they're going to try to talk to her. She can't take herself out of the dating game even if she wanted to. But men are often ignored. So men can literally be walking around the grocery store and no woman even say hello to him. He can actually exist like that for almost the rest of his life. And again, women just don't pay him any attention. So men can easily take themselves out of the dating game. Women can't. Okay, so women need to understand that that's how that works. Now, when you're dealing with men showing up to these events, when women, kind of like the woman before, is putting men down, and there's this energy of I'm better, that always hurts you when it comes to really honestly dating, period. Because even though she's 5'10", and I understand the fact that she's a tall woman, she has to understand the fact that 5'9" is the average height. So she might have to marry somebody that's shorter than her. Why? Because most men center around 5'9". So it's going to be 5'8", 5'9", 5'10". That is where most men are going to center. And then the taller men are going to go first because they're more desired by women. And I run into a lot of taller women who understand this. In fact, like I said, I've dated women that are my height and even 1 inch taller. Because many of them understand, okay, that it's very difficult for them to find taller men because a lot of times taller men prefer shorter women. It's like once a woman gets beyond 5'6", a lot of men really ain't checking for her like that. Okay, and so it becomes more difficult as women get taller. But that does not mean she can't have a man that she finds very attractive. He just might be in a shorter package. All right, so I want to make sure that I talk about that. But men, like I said, are very logical beings. All right. And you have to understand that. Men are logical. So they're not going to come out where they're not appreciated. And in the black community, we talk about this a lot, where a lot of black women don't always appreciate the black men that are in front of them. And there's this big fantasy movement where people are always trying to get to this high level, quote unquote, high value man. And there's so many criteria to get to him that the average man doesn't feel like he can reach it. So many men just kind of back out of it. All right. And then one of the things that I've learned about hanging around with Christian Singles Connect is that I believe, this is for the people that are creating these events. You have to find ways that the men and women interact. For instance, when I was doing the Intentions ATL event, I ran into a guy, okay, me and him were walking back, from another part of the event because it's kind of hard to explain, but it was kind of like right off the side of a food court. And so we're basically both, walking back. I was getting some water. I'm not sure what he was doing, but I had seen him earlier sitting at a table by himself. And he had sat there well over an hour, by himself. And so I talked to him and I was like, yo, are you going to talk to some women? Blah, 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 blah. You see anybody catching your eye? And then he was like, oh yeah, man, I got some, man. I'm about to go talk to him. But then he really never talked to anybody. I'm just being real. He never talked to anybody. He sat at the table for about 3 hours. That's what it was. He went home. It was all over and done with. What I've learned from doing CSC is that you have to force the women to talk to the men and force the men to talk to the women. So in this particular event, it was just they let us roam free. So at that point, the men that had the most confidence, the men that had the most experience were the ones that talked to all the women. Or at least when I say all the women here, they talked to the prettiest women. The women that weren't as attractive to the men as far as their personality is concerned, those were the women that didn't get anybody to talk to them. And I even talked to about 5 or 6 of them once the event was over, just to kind of get some feedback. So I wasn't talking to them to get their number. I was just talking to them to get their feedback. And many of those women were very frustrated. They were saying they would never come out again, but they didn't really, I think, get the understanding that, number one, a lot of men didn't see them quite as attractive. And it wasn't because they didn't have any attractiveness in them. They just didn't know how to really push it. They didn't know how to really showcase it. Because I've always said, most women are attractive. And then the next part was they hid themselves behind tables and in corners where it was going to take a lot more effort for a man to come over. The women that did the best were the women who came to the event solo. And remember what the one lady said. She was waiting for some friends to come to the event, but then she ran into other women that were there solo. See, going to a mixer is better when you go by yourself. Okay. And even as a woman, if you do have a friend, it is better for her to sit at an opposite table from you, not at the table with you. Because, for example, I actually had one lady that I was interested in talking to. And she was sitting with her friend. But when her friend got up, that's when I actually went over and I talked to her. And so me and her are talking, we're having a good time. And then her friend comes and sits right back down. So now her friend is making this conversation awkward. Because now I'm talking to 2 women, but I'm only interested in one. And so then the friend got up to do something else, grab some water, and I quickly was like, yo, can I get your number? I would love to contact you later, because I didn't want to say that in front of her friend because I'm not interested in her friend. And so a lot of times women will create barriers for themselves and put themselves in situations where men don't feel comfortable talking to them, or they just don't like that awkwardness of having to ask, a one woman for her contact information in front of another woman that he's not interested in. So that's just another one of those things I think that women need to think about when they create these events. And that's something, again, that I talk about when we have these events. I'm always telling people, why y'all sitting like that? Why don't y'all sit boy, girl? And I'll get people up and move them around. And when we were doing CS, like I say, at CSC, all the event organizers knew that's what we do. We will not allow 5 women to sit in a corner by themselves. We will separate them. And we will force them to sit next to a man. Okay? Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to loosen up that middle grade energy that exists in adults. And I've talked about this because men still have that 13-year-old boy inside of them, and women still have that 13-year-old girl inside of them. And so they're naturally going to lean toward, let me go hang out with the women. Let me go hang out with the men. Okay? Because that's what they do. All right? So I don't want to make this thing too long, but I think that, like I say, when it comes to the numbers, women have to understand that depending upon the type of event, you're going to have different types of men. And then you have to actually advertise so that men can see them. And like I said, for me, going to a Christian event, a lot of men feel as though Christian women, I'm just going to be real with y'all for a second. A lot of, Christian men feel like Christian women are going to be much slower to basically move it to the bedroom. I'm just going to say it. And so because of that, fewer men are willing to go to these events, especially if they're paid. So that's why a lot of the Christian events might only have 10 to 15% men. But the thing about it is, again, for most women, I'm always telling, especially if you follow my channel, it's like if you follow my channel, I really just don't understand. I tell women straight up in the non-negotiables, beauty is important. Beauty is important. Okay, so if you're a woman and you're already kind, okay, and you're already, supportive, and then you get your beauty right, you're going to come to these events and you're going to find that 10 to 15% of the men, all those men are going to try to talk to you. And then they're saved, sanctified, and love Jesus. Okay, so you're good. But if you come to these events and then you haven't thought about that, then you're going to be one of those women that basically gets ignored. And you might think, oh, well, if there was more men there, I would do better. But you wouldn't. I'm just being real. You wouldn't. And I know that's kind of, it's harsh to say, but I think that women have to understand that. It's the same thing for men. When I've gone to the events, like I said, that there's more men there, even in those events, I'll be honest, I've done pretty well. Why? Because I'm dressed a certain way. Okay, I'm trying to, have a groove a certain way. Okay, I'm not hanging out with this group of men, because a lot of them do that. They'll huddle together, like 4 and 5 men huddled together. Where with me, I'm looking for the woman to kind of go by herself or be put in a situation where I can pull her away, so I can talk to her. All right. And then when I talk to the woman, I'm to be honest with you, I make direct eye contact. I try not to look around, and I try to get her to make eye contact with me, because what that does is it puts other men in a situation where they feel uncomfortable actually approaching us. Because I've seen that happen as well. And I've had that happen to me where I'm talking to a woman and then I kind of look away and then some other dude come in to the conversation, because he don't understand that I'm sitting there talking to her. And at these events, everybody just wants to talk to people. Okay, but when you're, looking like you're intensely talking to somebody, people tend to stay away. All right. And see, all these things are things that people have to think about. But again, when you're dealing with like 10 to 15% ratio, it's just generally because most of these men, let's just be real, a lot of men want to have sex. And so when they're at the Christian event, they don't see it. Now, you go to the black people event. Like I said, most black events that I've been to, it's about 30% men. All right. So there's a lot more men there. Okay. But I think with a lot of men in those events, I'll be honest, I just don't think they know about them. Because every time I run into a man, just out and about, or, at any kind of event that I go to, most men really enjoy going to those things that I run into. But the problem is they don't know about them. They just simply don't know about them. And like I was saying before, like with Change Church, they just did not do a good job of advertising. Okay, because a singles event, you really need to put some money behind it. And then you need to actually get the word out. And I honestly don't think a lot of churches do a good job of that anyway, because I honestly think other churches should be advertising for other churches. Okay, we need to be a solid front instead of, constantly worried about another church. In fact, I'll just be real. I was at a church one time and they made mention to another church. And the way that the pastor made the mention, it was almost like he was jealous, because maybe he had heard that some of his congregation had started to go to that church. And it was just kind of like, why did you do that? We're supposed to all be in this together. Okay, so let's help each other. But I could feel that there was jealousy there. All right. And I get it. We're all human, but I think that we have to get beyond that. That's why I try to work with other YouTubers. As long as they're on the Christian path, the marriage path, the no drama path, I'm down to work with them, try to move with them, and try to make some things happen. But I did want to talk about this because, again, like I say, it's near and dear to my heart. I do think that men get frustrated by a lot of these events because, like I say, they don't lean into the men. They don't care about the men. They think about the men last instead of thinking about the men first. But I think that, honestly, the men that really want to be married, they're going to come out. Okay? And I've encouraged the men that follow me, stop doing all the complaining. A lot of the complaining is not helping you. It is not bringing you towards your goals, because that's what you have to think about. okay, what is your goal? Now, if you want to go overseas, y'all know I have no problem with men going overseas to find wives. You know, I even joke about it myself. Like I say, if I can't find a wife, you know, in a couple of, maybe in a year or so, I might do it. And I'll be done with it. I'm not even going to, if I do it, I ain't even going to care. There's great women all over the world. And I have no problem with men or women going someplace else and finding your person. Okay. But what you have to do, even if you go into those environments, is you cannot go in with anger, malice, frustration, because that's going to push those women away. All right. So you have to heal that side of yourself. Okay. And recognize, okay, you have that pain. All right. That's really important. So anyway, remember, every other Thursday, we do Thursday Talks. However, in June, we will be doing them just Zoom only. There will not be a live out here on YouTube. So I'll still put it up on the community page. But what I'm hoping to do is have a lot more interaction in those videos. Also, remember, we are going to be doing, like I said, the scavenger hunt on the 17th of May in the middle of the day. It's usually about 4 o'clock that we do the scavenger hunt. So again, that's a really good event. So please come out to that. I am trying to get more events going again. I feel better, even though my throat is a little clogged up today. But I am feeling better. The allergies are done. And now we can get to some events. So anyway, please like, please subscribe, and I'm going to see you all in the very next video.